finding time to practice is hard enough, but what if you're a bit intimidated by practicing and having to set up your painting equipment and all of those things can seem like quite a hassle. So one of the things I did to sort out this problem was to create a very big panel. I got myself a piece of MDF, or you can use hardboard or something like that, and then just primed it up with gesso and created little panels on it, just with the pencil drawing in some borders. I'll show you how it looks. Now with a big panel like that, with all these little frames drawn out in pencil, I can just put the panel up and quickly do a color study in whatever shape I'm in the mood for. Square, whatever, portrait and landscaping, the obvious choices, and just select a reference perhaps at random. You probably got a whole pile of them, or a lot of photos on your camera. Put one on your computer perhaps and just use that as inspiration, but paint quickly, use big shapes, just make it an intuitive process. Set the timer for 15 minutes and do a little thumbnail color study like that. And I can assure you it's a lot of fun, and you never miss, because there is no stress and all you're doing is creating shapes with your brush. And I guarantee you, you will learn so much about color studies and planning for a larger painting this way. Alright, so have a look at the quick demo, and then I encourage you to try something like this out for yourself. Here I've drawn out my painting format, and using this photo as inspiration, I'm going to get in a quick little color study. Respond to the subject, work quickly, boldly and intuitively. Don't waste too much time, just get stuck in with a large brush. This is a very small area I'm painting on, about a 6 by 6 inch, and just dive in with your brush. Emphasize something. I'm going to emphasize the color of the mountain and let that inspire the rest of the painting as well. Looking for some complementary colors and simplifying shapes, like these trees. Extremely complicated in that photo, as you can see, but if you simplify them, you can get something exciting. Still very descriptive, but using much fewer shapes, lots of juicy paint in the light areas, and look at the colors that are going on down at the moment. These blues with orange makes an exciting color combination. Does your color choice excite you? Look at these violets going down. You must be moved, excited by something. Really experiment, enjoy what you're putting down. If your painting is leaving you uninspired, do something to challenge yourself. Do something drastic. Use a color you wouldn't normally use. Use big brushes, much thicker paint than you'd normally use. Who's going to complain if you use a lot more paint than normal? There is no painting police, remember that. You are the master of what goes down on your painting panel. I just love these thick, juicy orange color notes, and they just sing against the blues and the light violet colors as well. Add a little bit of impasto, throw in some suggestion of the trees, just a few strokes of color, and that's enough. The utility poles, adding some strong vertical elements against all the horizontals, and I've got a little painting here that is full of vibrant color to guide me and inspire me for a larger painting. Just a little figure there, it's not necessary, but testing it out. And this is how you get color studies that you can have fun with, that guide you, that teach you how to paint with a lot more confidence. Do lots of them. And I hope that gave you an idea to try out. And the beautiful thing is you end up with this large refer to an older painting and show you what I mean between the before and after. So stick around to the end of the video and practice what you've seen, and I guarantee you'll see a big change in your paintings. Let's have a look at how this works out. I'm going to look at an old painting which I found, and here it is. And you can probably see in this painting that the light is not correctly described. The painting is all pretty much middle values. So I'm going to have a look at this a bit closer and discuss the question of using values and color temperature, and then also the paint application itself. So we turn this painting into something that is complete and a lot more powerful and attractive, because you want people to notice the painting. Maybe you're selling a painting, or you simply want a little showpiece in your house. This is going to show you how to take the painting just that step further. So instead of calling it finished at this stage, it's going to be halfway done, and you're going to finish it on a high note. Let's have a look how it works out. So here's our painting on the left, and on the right is simply a reference photo of a sunny day, sort of a countryside scene, something similar to what the painting is based on. The painting is really painted from imagination, which is one of the problems with inadequate lighting in a painting. Instead, refer to real life. As far as possible, if you can paint outdoors, do that. Otherwise, make a close note of the landscape in reality. Take some good reference photos and remind yourself of what the lights and shadows are in the real scene. You can see a vast difference in the brightness of the scene. If we just look at the grass in the middle ground, you can see that it's that sort of color, that sort of washed out yellow ochre color. If we put that in our painting and have a look at it, you can see, look how bright it should be for a sunny day. And we can tell we're trying to paint a sunny day here because there are quite strong shadows, but the light is more of a middle value rather than a light value on the more towards the extreme light. Even the sky is completely wrong. If we look at our reference photo, we can get an idea. It's quite blown out, of course, but still it gives us an idea of that sort of very light blue, light warm blue. Try that on our painting. We can see the colors are much too dark. And unfortunately for a lot of beginner paintings, they tend to look like this, where the lights are very dark, much darker than they should be. So if we push those lights, we can get a much brighter, sunnier looking scene. And of course our shadows, well, shadows leave much to interpretation, and but they are quite colorful. If we look in our reference over here, they're probably something more like that, right? A sort of warmish grey, blue, but we could push the blue a little more, and the shadows in this painting are not that bad. They can work, but we can bring a little more color into them, something like that, because there's quite a lot more light coming from the sky and reflecting into those shadows, so perhaps not necessary to make them as dark, especially over here, but that's the difference. So anyway, we can use a few tools to our disposal, a value scale, which you may have seen me use before, and you can find that on your color wheel as well, and then mixing your colors to correspond somewhat to what the values should be. Another issue is color temperature, right? A dark sort of yellow ochre in the painting there is much cooler than what it should be. Let's say we should be using something like that, which is much warmer. Alright, so direct sunlight on that will make it much warmer. Of course, colors far away are going to be cooler as well, but they can still be lighter. Right, it's still light, but cooler, right? Compared to a green, perhaps in the foreground, it's going to be much warmer because there's more yellow in that color. It's right up close to us. So color temperature does play an important part, as well as values. Well, let's see how this translates in our painting. Right, so now we can work out this painting and get the values correct, make those colors really stand out and get a strong light effect. Goes to the correct value for the sky, and that's as bright as we were seeing it on the screen a bit earlier, and what a difference that makes. And when you do this, it has a knock-on effect on the entire painting, and you have to adjust the values accordingly. So always get your sky value correct. That's definitely, for the most part, lighter and warmer than you may realize. Just softening those edges to remind me to do so later. Getting in a grey sky with a bit of orange mixed into that blue, or at least grey clouds, and some highlights on those clouds, and that should give us a bit more of an interesting sky. Now, using that blue and some red light, I'm going to adjust the colors on the mountain, and that's a corresponding upgrade in the value there, lightening that value up, and then applying the shadows as well. This will also increase the sense of distance and atmosphere in the painting. I'll bring a bit of yellow ochre, blue and white to create some foothills. The distant tree line, we can also soften that up a bit as well to create more light and atmospheric look to the painting. A little bit darker at the foot of the trees to account for shadow over there, but now you can see a lot more distance and atmosphere in the background. Now moving into the foreground, once again I'm going to pre-mix a few colors, starting from a sort of yellow ochreish pinkish color, kind of greyed down a bit at the foot of the trees, warming up and getting lighter into the foreground. As color recedes, the yellows disappear first, and you go into the reds, etc. So it follows, I've got to get the colors warmer and with more yellow as we get to the foreground, which I'm doing here, and look at the tremendous boost in light and color just by applying bright light values to the grass. Add some variety though, break things up a bit. I'm not completing this painting as such. You could add a lot more texture and variety in subsequent layers. So regard this as a fairly good blocking in to communicate and get the idea of light and color. And the whole theme of the video is to just illustrate the effect of getting the correct light and value into your scene. The shadows, basically blue is involved, and you can decide how you want to develop your shadows. Do you want them to be more violet, or you're going to try and just get that sort of grey-blue effect that we saw in the screen a bit earlier? I definitely like my shadows to have a bit more blue in them, so I will probably follow that theme in this one as well. Getting some strong dappled light in the foreground, as you can see, And now moving into the road colors,
pencil brand, paper brand,
a cooler
work brand karo.
color further
No color brand, no
as
pencil
we get
brand,
into
no.
the foreground.
India
You can also add more paint into the foreground and use a bigger brush to get more texture.
Germany se paper
You want the foreground to
London
sort
se
of
paper
rise up,
क्या है?
and to do that we need the colors to be a little warmer.
क्या अजंता टाइम पे लंदन अमेरिका से आता था कलर
You can see the value contrast between the light on the road
2000 साल हुआ
and the grass is very, very close in value.
मुझे नहीं मैं कहता हूँ एग्जांपल
And that once again makes the scene look much more light-filled.
कोई ब्रांड से ब्रांड नहीं होता है एक गलत सोच है
Bigger
दूसरा बहुत सारा
strokes,
कलर
letting some of the underpainting show through for extra texture and those markings that you find on a road like this, direction markings.
कंपनी वाला सेट निकालेगा
The shadow colors on the right,
वही आपको विक बनाते हैं
combination of earth tones with blue and also yellow with blue.
होटल का भोजन की तरह टेस्ट कहाँ से
Yeah, I'm just bringing in a bit more of that blue into that shadow, and
सब सब्जी एक रंग
I
का
think that's the way I will go.
भिंडी ढूंढना पड़ेगा बैंगन ढूंढना पड़ेगा
Brilliant white and some yellow ochre gets me this greyish
क्या
blue.
है only
A little
three
more
colors
alizarin
Study
takes
करो
it to the violet
three color में से हजार कलर
range,
बने
but you can see the shadow is lighter,
three में
more
three
colourful,
red आते हैं three yellow आते हैं
and
three blue
it
आते
just lifts the scene a bit as
हैं
well.
main color
Shadows
three and
must of
इसमें
course
main
be
color three
darker and cooler,
Question?
but they can still be colourful.
और yellow इसका टेस्ट करना है तो आप दोनों का मिक्सिंग बनाओ तो ऑरेंज में तो blue perfect है
Improvising a little with the
red
dark
perfect.
shapes there.
yellow डालो
The grass in shadow,
थोड़ा सा red
it's not black, of course,
just
it's still
yellow
a green,
Red,
but just
yellow
a dark green, so don't make it
1%
too
10%.
dark.
1 point dark color blue
Of course, in the depths
Or,
of the shadow of the trees, there will be
yellow.
some strong darks, but
green
nevertheless,
must green
it's
by
more of a color
Less green
temperature
versus
variety back there.
violet
It's not black
10% red.
color, it is simply
इसमें
a
2%
lot of variations
डालना
of
मेरा
darks
violet बन जाएगा
in a manipulation of color temperature.
crimson red होता तो
Bit of dappled light
Persian
helps
blue
those
होता
shadows to come to
chrome
life
yellow
again.
होता तो
Not too bad, because it's a series of
इसमें
darks
टेस्ट करो
with
कहीं नहीं
a little
पुराने
bit of
स्टाइल से
variety in there. I'm going to just
पुराना
try to
artist का
simplify it a little if I can,
रीडिंग करो पता चलेगा
with a variety of greens
आजकल तो
ranging
कंपनियां बहुत सारा
from
कलर निकालती हैं नजदीक नजदीक
some light to shadow.
फटी कलर होता है सब कलर खलास कर देते हैं 2-3 साल में आपका सब कलर दिया हुआ ही खलास हो
A
जाता है
few highlights here or there. I'll also need to
जो भी
soften up a
standard
few
जो
of
कलर
the
बनाते हैं,
edges just
हम
to
सब बना तो नहीं सकते
get that sort of
बहुत कम आर्टिस्ट
a three-dimensional look to the trees, but spending too much time with them, just getting an idea. These touches of burnt sienna and orange, adding a much needed red note against all that greenery.
मेरी पूरी सी कलर की ही वो मैंने
Try to keep the shapes simple, kind of abstract. Don't try to paint the leaves.
सीधी बात करता हूँ मैं
Just look for shapes of light and dark.
स्टोन पाउडर से मैं कलर नहीं बना और वो मैं सोचता actually मैं
And finish off by correcting the figure.
क्योंकि
And that's
नेचर का
pretty
मार्क
much
है वो कलर
the painting done.
धूप पड़ा है इस पे पानी पड़ा है
And certainly, I think
सब मार खाते
you can already see a big difference in color.
वो कोई chemical
But more importantly,
नेचर केमिकल
the light.
केमिकल तो है ऑलरेडी केमिकल
Right, so this is one way to rejuvenate a painting, or make sure your painting is
मिक्स करके
light-filled from the start. Large panel to help me prepare and get to know a subject. Now I'm going to show you how I used this technique to help me paint a landscape of an olive grove. It's going to show you how to perhaps change your thinking and how to come to grips with the subject, which isn't as
like to people's public
easy as you may think. Let's have a closer look. Okay, now painting an olive grove is a beautiful subject, and who doesn't want to take on something like that? But it's not simple. And when I looked at this beautiful reference, I was struck by the shape of the olive trees. That really caught my attention. And then, of course, the light playing through this whole scene. But if you look at these trees as well, they are not simple. And I'm talking really about the color. They look kind of dark. Perhaps the photo has, of course, made those darks a bit worse, but they're kind of a dark grey color overall, and you have to really look closely. This is one of the things about getting to know your subject before you paint it. You've got to observe closely, you've got to think about it, you've got to ask questions. What color can I use here? Do I have to use grey? Or what about using a violet or a crimson or maybe a orange? All sorts of colors like that come to mind. Maybe some green as well. So these are real problems you have to grapple with before you dive in. Otherwise you'll find yourself halfway through the painting wondering how the heck you got here and what to do next. Maybe question your own ability, but it was never that. It was simply about thinking about the subject and getting to know it and experimenting a bit with color, trying things out before you get to the main event. So I'm going to show you the color study now and how it helped me come to a few decisions about this painting. And then I did also a relatively small subject as well on a box canvas, and I'll show you the end result of that. And then ultimately I jumped into a larger painting. Having done these studies really does help. Right, let's have a look at the color study in action. Okay, I'm doing a very small study, and we're going to try and test out the tree shapes first. This is working on my large panel where I've drawn lots of little squares and rectangles, etc. to do color studies on. And you can see my previous video where I show you how to set that up. Now this subject has many interesting olive tree shapes. It's one of the attractions of the scene. But plotting them out is kind of tricky, and what I tend to do is imagine what I'm seeing, but frequently that gets things wrong, so you've got to observe your subject very closely. Now then, figure out the shadow patterns as well, very important. Alright, set those out, and it's not as, I guess it's kind of difficult to also focus on the subject, so you've got to really observe closely and then put in the light shapes, get those light patterns in the middle and background of the scene. Now, because the color study I'm working on is almost a square, just a slight rectangle, the reference is, of course, practically a letterbox shape. So I've got to figure out what I'm putting in, what I'm leaving out. And this is how you can work out a composition if your format is different from your reference. So you can pick out the important bits, leave out those that aren't necessary. I've got the main tree shapes on the left and a supporting one on the right. And then, of course, it's all about the color. Are you just going to make your trees dark silhouettes, or are you going to bring something interesting to the painting, something that will make it stand out and look exciting? If you want to sell your paintings, you've got to really capture the imagination of the viewer. They're not going to analyze the painting from a botanical point of view. They're going to be interested in how the painting makes them feel. Does the color provoke an emotional response? Hopefully it does, because color is a powerful tool of the painter. So you got to use that, and that means testing out colors. Here I'm using some greens to push a color backwards into the middle ground, and then using blues and lighter, cooler colors for the top of the tree to suggest height, and also picking up some of the sky color. Lower down, the trees will pick up some of the light coming from left to right, and also some light reflected off the grass. So think about the underside of branches. Are they picking up any reflected light from the ground or the grass as well? Testing out some orange and reds, and then the greens, greenish blues. Now these trees are already looking quite exciting, and I'm putting in some nice little green and yellows to suggest dappled light as well, using a large brush, as you can see. This is only about 8 centimeter, 6 by 8 centimeter little color study, and with a number 6 brush it gives me a nice big shape. Putting in that light, can you feel the light? You must already have an emotional response to this color study that you're working on. And if you're not feeling anything, then find something that's going to get you excited about it, get you involved. Try out an unusual color. Could be red, could be violet, alizarin crimson, phthalo green. But do something to get you really involved in the scene. Here's the small version, and here's a medium version that I completed thereafter. Covering the important topic of brushwork. Now, I have previous videos on the types of brushes I recommend for painting in this particular style, and you can find a link to one of those videos at the end of this video. And a quick reminder that I have a comprehensive How to Paint Like an Impressionist painting course. You can find a link to that below this video or in the description. Now, let's look at Impressionist brushwork in more detail. Let's look at what we mean by loose brushwork in the context of Impressionist painting. By this we mean loose brushwork is the use of expressive and gestural brushstrokes to suggest the form and texture of a subject rather than showing it in a highly detailed or realistic way. The goal of loose brushwork is to capture the feeling of the scene rather than the precise representation of it. And Impressionist painters often used large brushes and applied paint in a direct, spontaneous manner, and they would do color mixing often on the canvas itself instead of blending the paint away. The resulting brushstrokes would often remain visible on the finished painting, creating a sense of movement, texture, energy, and spontaneity. So loose brushwork is a hallmark of the Impressionist style and is used to create that sense of light and atmosphere and emotion in the painting. Now, it's important also to understand what the Impressionists were really all about. Fundamentally, the Impressionists were a rebellious group of painters. Now, what were they rebelling against? The Impressionists were rebelling against the old master. Today I'm going to talk about color mixing and a specific little tip to help you figure out what is color harmony in your painting. Color harmony in your painting is the overall sense of color in the painting. You know exactly what it means when you're outdoors and you look at a sunset or sunrise or midday. You know instinctively what the situation of the light is. When it's sunrise, there's that orange glow. You understand the color is a certain quality, and that quality of the color happens very easily when nature's taking care of it, because all of that sunlight is everywhere. It filters in, it's reflected in, it's direct, it touches and influences everything. So achieving that harmony is pretty easy, but when we have to do it with our paints, our few poor little paint colors and a few brushes, then it becomes difficult. Now, tip number one is understand the light that you're looking at, and more importantly, take that understanding of the light and move it onto your painting. You don't want to look at a tree and say, all right, it must be all green leaves, and go to your painting, put green leaves. But it's sunset, and that green is now an orangey, rich reds and orange colors, and there's purples, violets. So the way forward is understand what's happening in nature, ask yourself what's the light doing, and then try and take that idea and put it into your paints. Now let's take that example of sunset, sunrise. We know there's oranges and reds in the sky, and there's very warm directional light coming onto the landscape, perhaps. And we think of oranges, we think of reds. Now mix those colors into all the other colors, some more, some less. A green leaf becomes an orangey green because there's orange mixed in. Okay, let's have a look at a few examples of paintings where there's a specific color harmony. This one, not too difficult to figure out. The color harmony in here is pretty much a warm overall color. So the warmth of the morning light has infused everything. Even the shadows are a warmer violet than cold blue, for instance, in midday. So everything is infused with that warm light, and closer up it's more saturated, further away desaturated with white, and even perhaps some very little bit of blue. But that doesn't change the overall harmony. Now this example, an overall cool harmony, harmonies of blues, greens, even the reddish colors on the rocks are accentuating those cools, because that bit of subdued warmth makes the cools look even cooler. So blue in some form, cerulean blue and ultramarine, and even phthalo green being a very cool green in the blue sort of range, is brought into all of the colors that's in the rocks here. It's mixed in and creates an overall harmony. Okay, now in this example, this is more of a strong overhead light, 10, 11 a.m. in the morning. The light is not as warm anymore. It's not cold, but it's more clean and intense, and you're getting a sort of cleaner, very illuminated color. So therefore I'm not going to be using a lot of deep yellows and orange or alizarin crimsons, but more stronger, clean daylight colors like lemon yellow. There's burnt sienna, pretty much clean as it is. There's more blue in the shadows as well. Now you get situations where you've got maybe a scene where there's lots of water involved, but the light may be warm. How does that influence things? And this is pretty much this sort of painting here, where there are oranges in the greens, sort of warm colors, alizarins in the violets over here, they're warmish violets. Used in almost every situation I have, and that is a cool red and a warm red, like red light for warm, alizarin crimson for cool, the cool blue and a warm blue, like cerulean is cool, ultramarine is warmer, and yellows lemon yellow for cool, and cadmium yellow for warm, obviously white. Now those colors can be used to create anything you want, and if it's going to be warm, you'll mix up orange with your cadmium yellow and your red light or your alizarin crimson for a deeper, richer orange. You'll bring those harmonies in to your other colors as well, and that is how you create a painting that is consistent with the light that you see, and your painting will have that light as well. And there you have it, harmony in your color. If you use too many pre-mixed colors, tube colors, you're going to find that the green you're using out the tube throws out everything. Exotic blues, pre-mixed blues, same sort of thing. And until you really are comfortable with color mixing, it's probably not necessary. And then again, when you are experienced with your color mixing in a smaller palette, well, you're not going to want all those extra colors as well. They're just going to throw out a harmony and